Hey y'all, it is Libby Redden. Welcome back to the podcast. How are we? Are we okay? Are you okay? I'm feeling better. Little antidepressant wean off update. I have felt the most normal the past 2 weeks than I have for many months, and that has been fantastic. I'm in a much better headspace, and I feel good. And that's really exciting. So, thank you for. I'm pretty sure people have seen the seep through of the madness onto my social media and my podcast. But we're leveling out. It's okay. But today I wanted to talk about the topic of love, particularly romantic love. Reason being, a few months ago, I saw a TikTok and this girl was talking about the topic of self-love and individualism. And I saved it. I was like, I need to do a podcast episode on this. I could really talk about this. And this comes from a lens, and I talk about hyper-independence in my book. I talk about my experience of feeling like a very undesired woman in my childhood and teenage years. I didn't date. I didn't go to prom. I didn't do the things that girls were supposed to do. So it's coming from that lens, as well as then there was this stark 360 that I experienced when I turned 17 and 18 and started modeling. And suddenly, the things that men about me that deterred men, the height, the sort of masculine presence, suddenly became a point of currency and status. And I had a stark 360 of all of these men showing interest in me. But most of it wasn't good attention. So I went from being, really just labeling myself as one of the bros, right? To being hypersexualized in the space of modeling. And it really does a girl pretty dirty, and it was really rough. And so, because of these experiences from my teenage years, I was bitter. I was bitter, and I was angry. I was angry that I desired romantic love. I was angry that I desired companionship, because also when you're continually force-fed this idea from people, from social media, that your self-love, your individualism should be enough, that is where your focus should lie. Otherwise, you need to love yourself more, is honestly, it's bullcrap. And I want to talk about this because the fact of the matter is, self-love does not replace what a relationship provides. And it's very frustrating when you get fed content a lot that women, the powerful thing to do is decenter your life from men, only focus on self-love, reach that hyper-independence, individualism is the way, when I personally don't feel that is human design. I don't feel that is human design, and I don't think that self-love can replace what relationships can provide. We're social beings. We're beings that are centered around love, all forms of it. And when, honestly, at the point in my life when I bought into the idea, I'm telling myself that it's coming from a place of self-love, but really, it's coming from a place of bitterness. At least for me. It was coming from a space of fear, a place of sadness of the years of rejection, a place of sadness of the years of sexualization. And I'm explaining all this because I want the women, particularly, that follow me to know, and people in general, really, that desiring romantic love is not weakness. And we aren't getting told this enough, and it's creating a lot of hyper independence, and it's allowing people also that have been hurt by past relationships or their parents' relationship to live in that fear masked by the title of self-love, which is exactly what I did. And so going forward, I want to read a little bit from my book. And I talk about in my book what love is, defined on a core level, and why we want it. Why do we want it? Like, where does this universal desire come from? Romantic love specifically. I'm going to be talking specifically about romantic love when I refer to love. And again, the things that I'm sharing, this is opinion. You don't have to, if it doesn't resonate, that's okay. But I share in my book, What is Love? To answer this question very simply, I'll start with the dictionary definition: a feeling of strong or constant affection for a person. I think the key word there is constant. Real love for someone is something that never goes away. It's constant. Real love, this even applies to friendship, is relatively unbreakable, and that is why it is the most powerful force we as humans contain. That being said, you can dislike someone for a moment while simultaneously loving them. You can fall out of like with someone, but because of love's constant nature, when you give it away, I don't think it's really something that you can take back. And that's what makes it so scary. It's really scary and heartbreaking and tragic and incredible and beautiful. And so I think that's an important factor when we talk about love, is its constant nature that makes it very scary and makes a lot of people feel very fearful. On top of that, a quote I really love it's by Khalil Gibran. I'm not sure. But he says, "Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls." I love that quote because, to me, that is what love looks like between anyone. And there's something in that ebb and flow between the shores of two people's souls that self-love simply cannot replace, period. And the force feeding of hyper-independence and self-love being at the core of what will prepare you to be in a healthy romantic relationship, which is part of it, but there's so much more to it than finding your independence and self-love and self-confidence. There's a level of humility that has to be explored. There's a level of choosing of suffering. There's a certain level of suffering that occurs when you are single or choose to not have long-term partnerships with somebody. There's loneliness. There's a fear of missing out. There's questioning of what could be, but there's also suffering that is being chosen by being in long-term relationships, which is compromise. There's going to be sacrifice. There's going to be working through things from your past that a relationship will bring up. And it sounds really, kind of dark, I guess, but there's also a real choice of which way would I prefer to suffer, and with someone or without somebody. And I think that also brings up an important topic about love. Moving forward in my book, this is also a quote that I'll give you here. Alain de Botton, love him. He says, "We seem to know far too much about how love starts and recklessly little about how it might continue." And so, going back, I'm bouncing a little bit, but self-love and self-confidence, becoming a more independent person, yes, that is a piece of the puzzle. Those things will help you find someone that you can start love with. But how much do you know about how it might continue? How much do you know? And the thing is, you can learn these things before, and you probably should, before trying to work your shit out during the chaos of a relationship. You can do that too. And, I don't really like the word but, and there are also things you can deconstruct your views and examples of relationships you've had with your life before being in romantic partnerships or before getting into another one. And so I wanted to talk today about just deconstructing the overvaluing of self-love and independence. And I think a lot of women might have a similar experience to me where I felt like I was weak if I continued to desire companionship in a romantic sense. And it was because of that content that I was being fed, truly, which denies one of the most beautiful pieces of humanness, which is experiencing that ebb and flow, leaving the security of hyper-independence, choosing a new form of suffering that is experienced with another human being. And I'm not, this isn't my specialty. I'm still very in the thick of the journey with all this. But my only intention of recording this episode was that hopefully I could help someone else feel seen with my own experience and maybe break down some of the fear and bitterness and anger that I sat in for so long. And to validate that there's nothing wrong with being an independent person, loving yourself, being confident, and simultaneously learning about what might allow love to start, allow love to continue, and working towards a goal of companionship. Because there is so much that can be learned in that arena that just isn't found in other arenas, and I do believe that. And that's fine. And one other quote I'll say, and that is why, quote, no matter what we do, love saturates our lives in every possible way. Even when we try to escape, it finds us, if merely to tease us with what we could have. And I think love does that very purposefully because it's such a core piece of the human experience that I think saturates your life willingly or unwillingly, because there's lessons that demand to be taught in the arena of romantic love. And that's why the desire for it will not be replaced by self-love, because the lessons that demand to be taught will saturate your life regardless. And, you can go kicking and screaming, or you can make peace with that human spiritual design and navigate it the best you can. So I'll end on that. This felt like a little bit of a rant, but I hope it struck a chord with somebody, and I appreciate y'all for tuning in. It's been very fun to see the new listeners on the podcast. This is going to come out in November, so it might be a little bit... Some of my guest recordings I recorded like 6 weeks ago, so some of my updates at the beginning of those might be a little off topic. They're a little bit more in the thick of the antidepressant withdrawal updates, so if you're confused, that's what's going on. Anyway, hope you have a good day. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk soon.